President Trump so far isn't backing down on his plan to take over Greenland. Trump says he spoke with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and told him Greenland is imperative for national security and only the U.S. can provide that.
Well, I don't think they're going to push back too much. Look, we have to have it. They have to have this done. They can protect it. Denmark, they're wonderful people. And I know the leaders are very good people, but they don't even go there. And, because the boat went there 500 years ago and then left, that doesn't give you title to property. So we'll be talking about it with the various people.
The Justice Department says the attack on a Minnesota church over the weekend by an anti-ICE mob was a clear violation of the FACE Act, and they are actively pursuing charges. Pastor Kirk Graham of River Valley Church in Minneapolis says what happened was an attack on faith.
This is unjust, it's un-American, but more than that, it's against God. You do not want to be the people that get between God, the living God, the creator of the universe, and his children who come into his house and to worship. And so this is an opportunity as Christians, as believers, to be strong, to be bold.
Former CNN host Don Lemon was among those who stormed the church. To him, the church is all about white supremacy.
Certain degree of entitlement. I think people who are, in the religious groups like that, it's not the type of Christianity that I practice, but I think that they're entitled, and that entitlement comes from a supremacy, a white supremacy. And they think that this country was built for them, that it is a Christian country, when actually we left England because we wanted religious freedom. It's religious freedom, but only if you're a Christian and only if you're a white male.
Family Research Council President Tony Perkins says we have to understand that there is something bigger here.
This is the hostility toward religion in this country has been latent for some time. Now it has become blatant, this hatred toward God. What is taught in the classroom in one generation will become the ruling philosophy of the next generation in government. And that's what we see. This is what has been taught, this anti-Christian, anti-Western values to lead to a place where someone who claims to be a journalist charging into a church, interrupting a Sunday morning worship service.
January is National Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and one organization is offering tips on how you can help law enforcement. More from Chris Woodward.
This list is by no means extensive, but Kathy Haddam of Enough is Enough says there are things that people can look for.
Some of the things that people can just be on the lookout for, including their own child, or whether it includes someone they see out on the street or in a restaurant, would be things like looking withdrawn. Maybe they are feeling or acting very secretive about their activities, whether it's their phone use, internet use. They may have signs including, especially if you're talking about your own child, weight changes, they look overly tired or sleepy, or even evidence of actual physical abuse.
At home, Haddam recommends parents see whether their children are isolating themselves more from family or showing signs of psychological stress.
These are all some initial indicators, and we list a lot more in terms of an exhaustive list on our website at internetsafety101.org.
Human trafficking may be something that people think happens in urban areas, but Haddam says human trafficking is happening in all 50 states and even in remote areas. I'm Chris Woodward.
More news online at afn.net. I'm Rusty Pugh.
AFA Stream is a resource for life-changing instruction and information, a source of wholesome entertainment and relaxation, plus access to some of your favorite AFA shows. You can watch a lot of content for free, or you can become a Great Commission partner. Then you'll not only open the door to everything AFA Stream has to offer, you'll get benefits like a subscription to The Stand and some really nice exclusives. Why not get started today? It's easy. Visit stream.afa.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Tuesday, January 20th, and this may be a red letter day. Potentially, just maybe, the DOJ is getting ready to actually do something. Like, you know that meme with that stick figure that's like poking the rock and it's like, come on, do something? Like, that's literally how everybody feels about this Department of Justice, especially looking at Don Lemon and the other terrorists that stormed a church in Minneapolis on Sunday. And now Harmeet Dillon, who is a deputy attorney general, is suggesting that Don Lemon has been put on notice, whatever that means, by the Justice Department after he joined the anti-ICE agitators, that's Fox News term for terrorists, who stormed the church in St. Paul during a service on Sunday. So Harmeet is the Justice Department's Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, and so there are some responses suggesting, well, you know, is this just going to be kind of a civil rights violation and more in a civil sense, or is he actually going to be arrested, criminal charges, some of that. But interestingly, there's a little bit more to this story, and our friend Meg Basham with Daily Wire has put out, a couple of really good threads about these particular agitators, suggesting, that these are people who've done this before, and that this is also a career activist who disrupted the Minneapolis worship service. It was also someone who targeted Pete Hegseth's DC church. And so that is the headline actually from Daily Wire. I'd encourage you to go and read that piece. But what does this mean overall for where we're at in 2026? Let's welcome in Ryan Helfenbein, who is the Vice President of Communications and the Executive Director of Standing for Freedom Center. And Ryan, I hope that the DOJ is actually poised to make arrests, not just because, nobody on our side really likes Don Lemon, but because this kind of behavior is something that obviously is not protected constitutionally, regardless of what he says about the First Amendment. This is something that if the situation were reversed and this, these were protesters, let's say going into the Capitol building, certainly there would be arrests, right? So this is just asking for accountability. But from a Christian perspective on what this means for protesters specifically targeting a church and suggesting that because the pastor has some affiliation with the federal government, that this means that churches are fair game. I mean, I think that this is an escalation from the left that deserves a response from the right.
I wholeheartedly agree with what you just said, even on the tail end of that. It does deserve a response from the right, and one that, again, would invoke the Constitution, civil law, would make sure that we are pursuing equal protection under the law. And I think one of the things, you go back to the Biden administration, the FACE Act was used to put homeschoolers behind bars, to put protesters or even those who just would dare pray on the outside of an abortion clinic. The FACE Act was invoked, as well as a Klan Act was utilized to put women, old women over the age of 80 in prison for extended sentencing. Obviously, that does not seem like fair treatment. And so you actually have these paid agitators, young people. They're menacing. They're threatening. The idea is to get people to use physical violence against them, or trying to stir that up within the folks in the church because they want to catch it on film. No one took debate, but certainly for those in that church, citizens, to then say, no, we have the constitutional right not to be interrupted. And then, by the way, this is not public property. It's private property. No one has any right to protest in a private house of worship any more than they have the right to protest in my living room or your living room. No one can invade your home and then say, well, I'm going to invoke the First Amendment. I have a freedom of speech, and I'm constitutionally protected. And this, by the way, Jenna, and many people have already acknowledged as much, for someone like Don Lemon, supposedly a veteran journalist, reporter, worked at CNN for over 17 years. I think he's disgraced. I think he's a hack. It's very revealing that he would not have some kind of working knowledge, at least with that. He's almost 60 years old. He's certainly not a young person. The fact that he would feign, ignorance there and then somehow say, no, I'm just here following this group when clearly they were meeting in the parking lot before. There's video footage even from Don Lemon that he posted online where he's identifying what the group is and what their plans are. And then I believe there's already documentation that earlier in the day, Don Lemon was interviewing Keith Ellison. He's the 30th Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. He was interviewing him as well. And so the interesting thing, and I think a lot of people are kind of piecing this together, was this more than just this small group? Who is behind it? Who paid for it? And I absolutely agree. This Department of Justice under the Trump administration has to prosecute this under the law. Someone, and not just one individual, but I think many need to go to jail. And if that doesn't happen, I think all of your listeners would agree, I think you can kiss 2026 goodbye. This is the evangelicals that are largely supportive of President Trump, wherever they are. I don't care if they're in blue states or red states. Overwhelmingly, evangelicals have supported this president. And if this president cannot, under the Constitution and under the law, protect our houses of worship, I think 2026 will be a referendum on that failure.
Yeah, and I think that perfectly describes kind of the general tone and just feeling of a lot of us who, and I would put myself even in that category of ones who've been, really frustrated with the lackluster, sort of response to what was the Trump mandate in 2024. And especially when we've looked at how the Biden administration, really targeted Christians in particular. I mean, not just Trump supporters, but pro-life Christians, Christians who were standing up for the truth, and really made it seem like, you can be and identify anything else you want to be and identify with in America except for a Christian. And the Trump administration has, historically definitely stood with religious freedom, stood with Christians, the faith-based coalition, all of that. But standing with, from a messaging standpoint, is very different, as you know, Ryan, very well, very different than action, especially when the left is now intentionally targeting, not just, with words and Rosie O'Donnell, going on some podcast and, yakking and shrieking and whatever. I mean, nothing that we can just laugh at, but actually going in, disrupting a church service, and something that easily could have escalated, but going into churches and targeting them and targeting the pastor. I mean, if this isn't just nipped in the bud by the DOJ and a very firm stance from President Trump that this country will not allow that. I mean, and I don't think that we can rely on Mayor Frey, over, or any of the Democrats over in Minnesota. But if the Trump administration doesn't say, we will not tolerate this, then likely there will be an escalation. I mean, that's just how it works. And I think you're right with the overall outcome, unfortunately, of the midterms. And it's frustrating to see that this is kind of where we're at.
Yes. And so we know step one is what has already been said, by the Assistant Deputy Attorney General, that this will be prosecuted under the law. The Klan Act has already been mentioned. That step one is to have the investigation, and then there should be prosecution, and then ultimately sentencing. But there is no doubt that the law was broken. People are guilty. We have a sitting president who has had his mugshot taken, lest we forget. And we have a president who has been shot at 2 attempted assassinations, lest we forget. And so we have to be reminded, like the left is ravenous. They are out for blood. They are out for vengeance. They are out for death. And it has to be more than strongly worded letters. It has to be more than tweets. It has to be more than platitudes that are being given from a platform. There has to be some action and not just talk. And so I do believe, and I'm going to say this, I am very hopeful and expectant that this will be prosecuted. I am hopeful and expectant that even Don Lemon will not be able to hide behind his own camera and say, no, I was there as a journalist. What network, Don? And, go look that up. What network does he work for? Where was his badge? No, he did not have the right to be on private property. And let me just say this, Jenna, for all your listeners, even at a place like Liberty University, we are not a public university. We're a private university. No journalist can walk on private property without asking for permission. And so Don violated that. These are basic understandings of civil law, and he violated that. He can't hide behind it. So even he should be prosecuted, and I hope that he is. And then as to the radical nature of these groups, there's obviously a bigger play, a bigger hand. It's something that they're hoping to get. And I think that morning, I think that what this group was hoping to see was violence. I think they were hoping to have the pastor throw a punch or somebody in the church to handle them physically. And by the way, let me just say, if they had handled them physically in order to forcefully remove them from that sanctuary, I think they were well within their rights to do so. If a security team wanted to do that, there was nothing wrong with that. However, they didn't do any of that. That's okay too. And I think that the reaction that needs to be had is happening right now, which is basically pursuing justice under the law. And every Christian citizen in the United States is not a second-hand or second-tier citizen. We're deserving of equal protection. Our religious liberty is first among rights for a reason. You know this. I'm talking to a constitutional attorney. You know this better than anyone. And we need to recognize, too, that there are constraints on freedom of speech in so much as no one has the right just to enter into a private place of worship and do whatever they want. And I think we're all rightly outraged this morning. Every Christian should be outraged, should feel in some way insulted by this, but ultimately recognizing that they hate us because they hate our Lord and Savior. And I think we need to recognize that as well, that Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble. But he also said, fear not, for I have overcome the world. And so we are more than conquerors, and we need to always remember that, no matter what the season of life is.
Amen. And it really is a warning, I think, to Christians in America to not just get complacent with the blessings of liberty that we have been afforded for so long, but always remain vigilant and remain on guard, because the enemy, as the Bible says, comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And this is just an example of breaching the walls of a church. But Ryan Helfenbein, my special guest this morning, he's going to join me continuing through the break. We're going to take a break here and be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
What if healthcare could be more than bills and bureaucracy? What if it could reflect faith, foster community, and offer spiritual support? At Redeem HealthShare Ministry, the mission goes beyond medical bills. It's about honoring Christ and embracing healthcare that aligns with Christian values. Redeem members share medical expenses through monthly contributions, supporting one another in a Christ-centered community. It's not insurance, it's believers helping believers through financial support and prayer. And Redeem Health Share provides freedom for members to select the doctors, hospitals, and treatments that are right for them. No networks, no restrictions, just faith-driven care. From everyday checkups to unexpected medical emergencies, Redeem offers flexible programs and encouragement rooted in Scripture. Because your health care should reflect your faith, not compromise it. More at redeemhealthshare.org or call 1-844-REDEEM-0.
This Sanctity of Life Month, we honor the over 67 million babies whose lives have been tragically ended through abortion since Roe. Sadly, with the abortion pill accounting for over 60% of all abortions, babies' lives are at even greater risk now. But in the midst of this darkness, there is a light that shines, and that's preborn. Preborn's clinics have rescued over 400,000 babies from abortion and have prayed with over 88,000 women to come to Christ.
When I heard her heartbeat, I decided to keep her. And now my daughter's about to be 3. I don't know where my life would be without her.
Would you help Preborn and AFR rescue 5,000 babies? One ultrasound session costs $28. To donate, go to afr.net or call 877-616-2396. That's 877-616-2396.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. A Kansas school district is facing a federal civil rights complaint over a classroom assignment. A teacher at Marshall Elementary School in Eureka told children to identify their role models. One student identified Charlie Kirk. Another mentioned President Trump. A third said Jesus Christ was their role model. The teacher pushed back, said kids could not have role models who were involved in politics or religion. Now, the American Center for Law and Justice is now representing one of the students. Their lawyers say the teacher did not restrict kids from picking secular role models. What's up with that? Even more disturbing, students were rebuked by the principal for telling their parents what happened. The kids were told future complaints should be only addressed with school leadership. It sort of makes you wonder why the school doesn't want parents to know what's going on inside those classrooms, right? Well, I have much more to say about this on my website, toddsterns.com.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and I'm here with my special guest, Ryan Helfenbein, who's the Vice President of Communications at Liberty University, also the Executive Director of the Standing for Freedom Center. You should be following both of those, follow the Executive Director. Well, do follow Ryan. Follow Ryan Helfenbein. You should be following him on X and Instagram, especially those platforms, but also the Standing for Freedom Center. They put out a lot of really good content that is very focused and based in a biblical worldview, and kind of short videos on how to think through things. Almost Ryan, dare I say, in a Charlie Kirk sort of fashion. I really like your video content there, and I always watch those and think, wow, that was framed really well. You do such a great job on those, and I always appreciate you joining because one of the things that we're learning from this instance in and this, I would frame it as a terrorist attack on a church in St. Paul, is that separation of church and state, quote unquote, really only runs one direction, because the left constantly invokes this kind of historical myth to exclude religious voices from public life, especially and intentionally Christians. But when it suits their narrative, they have absolutely no problem inserting political actors and media figures like Don Lemon directly into church spaces to push their ideological messaging. And that's not neutrality, that's selective enforcement. And so churches are treated now as fair game as long as they're politically useful. And so it's not a matter of actually trying to separate church and state. It's actually using churches to become ideological theater when they want to suggest that a church's worldview, which necessarily can and should include political and policy viewpoints on things, like immigration, law enforcement, pro-life, all of these things, then they're saying, well, that's not okay, and we will actually come and invade your spaces. And I think that Christians need to see this for what it is as not just, against law enforcement, against a particular pastor, any of this, but really it's targeting Christians specifically to say, hey, you can't be involved in the civil government sphere, otherwise we are going to come and attack you.
Yeah, very well framed how you put that, and that is a part of their tactic. And we a few years ago, remember BLM? We were reminded of that. By the way, St. Paul, Minneapolis, that was ground zero for where BLM started after the Floyd moment, and his obviously tragic death from an overdose, fentanyl, and BLM went around the nation burning down many of our public spaces, but they went into private businesses and even burned down a church. And we saw their absolute vitriol for people of faith, and Christians in particular. The whole goal, I believe, with all of this, it is Marxist in nature, but it's to create two systems, rules for thee, but not for me. And many of these agitators believe that they are under the cover and the protection of their politicians. You'd mentioned Mayor Fry, and of course, obviously Tim Walz, who is not seeking re-election in Minnesota, and it was because of all of the fallout from the Somali and the mismanagement of over $8-9 billion estimated in funds and taxpayer funds going towards all of these programs. But they believe that they have the covering and the protection to do this. That's why they do it, and they believe that it will be consequence-free. They believe at the end of the day, even if they were to get their mugshot, I believe Megan Basham had mentioned one by name William Kelly, who went to Christ Church in D.C., paid agitator. Surprise, surprise, he's not from Minnesota, not from Minneapolis, St. Paul. And he went into that church just a couple of days ago in St. Paul, and he has been in other places. He's been arrested before, but they know that they'll go into the penalty box. It's almost like ice hockey. I'll go into the penalty box for a little bit, but I'm going to be out skating again. And they know that. And that's not how the left prosecutes Christians who pray outside of abortion clinics. They don't prosecute in such a way that you're going to be booked, and then you're going to get bail, and then you're going to be at home that afternoon. No, they want to put you away for a very long time, and they're going to use whatever means necessary they feel that they can and they'll get away with to put people away for a very long time. This two-tier system of justice, that kind of, and then also I would just say this goes back to a book written years ago by Christopher Caldwell called The Age of Entitlement, this two Americas mentality. Some Americans are living under 1776 and others are living under 1964. And they believe that it is incumbent upon the government to provide them with everything they need for living, housing, food, clothing. It's being demanded, while the other half of America goes to work and earns a living in order to pay for all of it. And we've lived under that shadow for such a long time, and that's why there's so much division today, because it's been institutionalized in the way that there is not, in many cases, equal protection under the law. And that's why justice has to be pursued in this instance.
Yeah, so well said. And, we also need to continue to call for justice. This is what a legitimate civil government should do. It shouldn't pick, winners and losers or targets of the government's power based on political party or based on whether or not the person is an opponent of the current administration or, any of those things that do amount to lawfare. Justice should be blind. It should be equal, and it should be enforced. And justice also shouldn't be not extended when a current administration might have, perhaps other priorities or other things that it's doing, and just saying, we're not going to focus on this. I mean, that's literally the job of a legitimate civil government, is to enact justice so that people can live peaceably in in our societies. If justice is not served and the civil government isn't doing its job of enforcing a moral and upright society, we see the chaos that we've seen, frankly, in blue states, like California, with a lot of these shoplifters that just come in, like we saw during the mostly peaceful protests. I mean, we're all old enough to remember those, and I say that in air quotes, from Don Lemon's former network of CNN. During 2020, we see that there is lawlessness when the civil government doesn't come in and do their job of promoting good and restraining evil, and acting with the authority that God has provided to enact justice. And this also means in this context that we do have to frame and reframe separation of church and state correctly, because that actually, the First Amendment restricts the government, not the church. And so if this pastor wants to be part of, the government in terms of, volunteer and, do all of these things, there's no restriction on in his other capacity of being part of a church. And the church has to stand up better and know what a legitimate government actually means, biblically what that requires, so that then when there are instances like this, Ryan, then we know already what not only the policy and the law is, but also what it should be and how it can apply to these different situations. Because this isn't just a matter of, well, we're standing up for this church because, these were leftist protesters. I mean, imagine if, a conservative podcaster walked into a church and stormed a church with a bunch of protesters to criticize progressive, radical, DEI or progressive racial theory or something like that. I mean, we shouldn't support our own side doing something that is wrong, just because we may agree with their posture of what they're protesting. And this is where I feel like our sides have become way too tribal in this, where it seems like some on our side, and I would say this is kind of the woke right branch, almost seems to want selective enforcement when they prefer it. And that's a dangerous ground as well.
Yeah, I would absolutely warn anyone from this idea of, and I would say there are pockets, there are aspects of folks on the so-called right or woke right that are behaving and acting and thinking philosophically about all of this in the same way that the left is, but not at scale. I would say not in any way the same size and the same organizing and the same money behind it. That it's not that. But there are people who do not understand the law. And, it's fascinating. You go back to our founding and the Christian founding that we had blue laws in this country. We had, that governed the Sabbath and Sabbath keeping. We had blasphemy laws that existed all the way up. Some of them weren't fully removed until the late 70s, 80s. But the majority of this, the existence of our country, we have gone back to our Constitution and we've invoked the name of God. But which God? And that's often the question, which God? And we know that if you go back to the founders and you go back to the state constitutions, many of them had a declaration of faith in God. And then even some of them in the preamble have invoked the name of the triune God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And it's very clear in our tradition that this was a Christian nation. We often hear the boogeyman term Christian nationalism, and you ask anybody what they think that means, and you'll get a different definition. But for the first 80 years of this country, it was basically our Capitol building in D.C. Housed worship services on Sunday morning, Christian worship services. There was not a particular denomination at the top. There was no state denomination from the federal level, but certainly, State of Virginia and Rhode Island and New Hampshire, all of them had churches that were influential at the state level. America has never been particular to one denomination, and that's what really religious liberty has all been about. There was a plurality all the way going back to the beginning. You were free to pursue and worship God how you saw fit. And so many Christians have an amnesia, or rather, some of them, they've forgotten it in our cultural memory and our legal memory Others never learned it. Jenna, they've never been taught. They've been propagated a different myth under secularism that somehow the United States was formed in the 1950s after all these various Warren Court decisions that came from the 50s and 60s and all these various reforms in legal theory. And that's certainly not the case. And we have to remember that. And I think the best ideals and principles of freedom going all the way back to the founding is to understand that this is religious liberty for all. It applies to everyone, but it must be respected. And the left certainly does not respect these institutions. Their hallowed grounds are the courthouses, and they don't always act like it. But the courthouses and the state houses, those are their hallowed grounds. And ironically enough, that's public property. They could not do the kind of demonstration they did on Sunday morning at the city's church in St. Paul, Minnesota. They could not do that at a courthouse. They wouldn't even dare try it. And that's public ground, meaning it belongs to every citizen. And so it is clear they do not respect our houses of worship. We need to get back to a place in America where every citizen does respect houses of worship, whether it be a church or a synagogue or whatever. We need to get back to that as a country.
Yeah, so well said. And how would you encourage pastors during this time? Because, I know that there are a lot of pastors in America that genuinely just want to focus on discipling their flock, being, the peacemakers, and they don't necessarily have the same kind of fight fire with fire kind of attitude that may, be a little bit necessary in this kind of particular climate. And I'm reminded of that old Mel Gibson movie, The Patriot, about the Revolutionary War. And there's a character in there who's one of the Baptist ministers who says, when they're trying to get all of the militia to go and fight the redcoats and everything, fight for freedom, and he picks up a rifle and they go, minister, and he said, well, sometimes you gotta, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like, sometimes as a minister, you gotta pick up a stick and go out and beat off the wolves. And I'm thinking, and it's like, that's right. Kind of maybe where we're at today. And pastors need to have a little bit more mentality of not just letting the wolves come in and hurt the sheep.
It's so funny. You recall, that's one of my favorite movies, but Muhlenberg, that is actually, that character was inspired by Muhlenberg in the Black Robe Regiment. And these were pastors who put on their revolutionary garb. And apparently, as the story goes, and I'm not going to get it right, there are many historians who know the story better, but he preached a sermon, and at the end of the sermon, he pulled off his priestly robe, or his black robe with his frock, and underneath it was a revolutionary uniform. And he was just inspiring his people to take up arms in his congregation, and he wanted to lead by example that, yes, you can do this, and it is a good and godly pursuit. There is such a thing as just war, and we know that too. I think the question you asked is so critical. How should pastors, and I even think of Christian leaders, if you're in your church and you lead a Bible study, or you're a pastor in your church, or you're a youth pastor and you're around young people, I think what we need, Christians have been rightly taught that, ultimately our kingdom is not of this world. We have no lasting kingdom. We know that. And we know that we do not meet violence with violence. We know that. We know that we must turn the other cheek. We know that there is going to be persecution and trials. We know all of that. What I would want Christians to understand, especially pastors in particular, is that we do have a nation that was founded by Christians, and we are a nation of laws. And we are not in first century Rome. And the answer to every time that persecution comes is not to roll over and die. We are not in a place where we have an occupying force living in America that is a pagan government that is overruling our laws, and the only thing we have are just these religious councils where we have disputes. We are not living in first century Judea. We are not living at the time in which Paul wrote the epistles. And I say all that to say that is the word of God, and it applies universally to Christians everywhere. But we do need to recognize that the very thing that is written, like in Romans chapter 13, about, the government is ordained by God and is a deacon of God's justice, to promote the good and to punish evil. This is a Romans 13 situation where the right kind of government, and I mean that in terms of righteousness, rightly ordered, that recognizes good and recognizes evil, punishes evil and promotes good. That's exactly what we need in this instance. And so we do not just accept what took place. We do not accept injustice. We accept it in terms of God's overall will and purpose for our lives. Somebody may punch me in the face today. Now, am I going to hit that person back? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the situation. Probably not, Jenna. That person was to come after my wife. Would I hit that person? Oh, absolutely. You better believe I would, because that's my responsibility, is to protect and defend others. But in the ultimate sense, I pursue justice. In the ultimate sense, the best way to handle that situation as a Christian is to get the authorities involved and to make sure that person faces just consequences. And I think that's where we sit today. I think Christians need to understand that while we face persecution, we do not live in a war-torn third world. Sometimes I know it's very dystopian what we see on TV, but there are measures, there are ways to exhaust our legal system in order to make sure that this injustice is remedied. And that's what we need right now is smart Christians who don't just roll over every time they face confrontation and every time an agitator gets in their face.
So well said. Well, we got to leave it here, Ryan Helfenbein. I so appreciate your wise words and, admonitions and encouragement as well, to the church, to be the church, to stand up firmly, even in the midst of, a lot of these really interesting times, I'll put it that way. But I think this is an opportunity where the church can stand firm, promote ultimately the truth of the gospel of Christ, but also our engagement and our rightful engagement in a legitimate civil government. So Ryan, you can follow him on X. You can also follow Liberty University and the Standing for Freedom Center, and we'll be right back with more.
The biblical principles our nation was founded upon are under attack.
They're trying to change the whole course of our understanding about the way things are about our own country.
Sandy Rios.
They're trying to untether us from our Constitution and certainly from our God.
Trust Sandy Rios to bring you unfiltered, insightful commentary from a Christian worldview. Find her podcast titled Sandy Rios 24/7 online at afr.net.
Let's think about what God has done. I would wager that his top news story is still that the free salvation through the blood of Jesus Christ is available to all. I wager that will be the top news story until that salvation is no longer available. You will have made your decision for eternity. He doesn't ask us to do anything he won't, and then he does above what we can possibly do.
Hear Todd Herman on A Disciple's View, weekdays 12 p.m. Central on AFR.
For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Look briefly at one of your fingers. You've just witnessed one of the greatest displays of God's creative intent there is. No other person in all the world, even an identical twin, shares your fingerprint. God specifically designed each of us to be unique. That means we shouldn't try to carbon copy anyone else in the Christian faith. If God made you an arm in his body or a kneecap, praise be to our glorious God for drawing us to become a part of his body. How freeing it is to realize that we were never meant to copy anyone but Jesus.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Maybe this is you too. There's enormous frustration right now with healthcare costs. It is amazing. Healthcare costs for families in the last 20 years have almost tripled, and it just keeps getting worse. All this to say, this is why MediShare is so in demand right now. People are looking for alternatives, and MediShare is proven you can save thousands of dollars a year and actually like it more. Over 1 million Americans are now part of healthcare sharing, and MediShare is the gold standard. It's trusted, it works, it's been helping people save money and have peace of mind now for 30 plus years. It's not some big impersonal thing either. It's a community of people like you helping each other. So yeah, if you're frustrated too, here's your chance to make a refreshing change. You'll notice the difference as soon as you call. They're easy to talk to. You can get a price within 2 minutes. Here is the number. Call 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE. 833-44-BIBLE.
Hi, my name is Susie. I live in Florida, and I just wanted to say that preborn means so much to me. It's so important for the mothers that may have chosen an abortion and broken their heart for the rest of their life. But more importantly, the life of a baby that is innocent and needs that opportunity to live the life that God has planned out for them.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, this past Sunday was the Sanctity for Human Life Sunday, which, of course, began when churches decided to really engage the issue of life in the wake of the terrible decision of Roe versus Wade, which thankfully was overturned recently by the Dobbs decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. But there's still so much work to be done on the issue of life, and thousands and even hopefully millions are going to be marching this weekend and throughout the week in various events from coast to coast, marching for life. And one who has been very heavily involved in the fight for life is Father Frank Pavone, founder of Priests for Life, and he joins me this morning. So what is the landscape coming up this week for marching for life and pro-life policy?
Well, hi, Jenna. Thanks. It is an exciting week. Many people think about the March for Life as a single event. It is the largest annual pro-life event this Friday in Washington. The second largest event on the West Coast happens the next day in San Francisco, the Walk for Life West Coast. But these are not just two events put on by two different organizations. There are clusters of events. There are literally dozens of events taking place in the next few days in Washington, sponsored by dozens of groups. And likewise, out on the West Coast, there will be multiple events this weekend. So I want to invite our listeners to tune in and connect as well as they can to these events. I'll personally be organizing and leading 6 different events, 4 in Washington, 2 in San Francisco. And people can go to prolifemarch.org to see what these events are. Thursday, of course, is the 22nd, the actual anniversary of Roe. So we're going to have a national protest in the morning against Planned Parenthood, a prayerful protest at the Planned Parenthood on 4th Street in Washington. Then at noon, we'll be at the Supreme Court, the location of that disastrous Roe decision, and we'll be memorializing the victims of Roe. We'll have some members of Congress, pro-life leaders. We'll be laying flowers on the sidewalk there. The next morning, the big national prayer service. I'm really excited about this one. And we can talk about it in more detail, but we're going to honor Charlie Kirk's memory, present an award posthumously to him. I had been arranging for him to come in person to the event, but we'll have some leaders from Turning Point there. We will have a commemoration of our nation's 250th birthday, because it's the Declaration of Independence that says we have a right to life and that government exists to secure that right. We'll have Liche Ariza, one of the actors from The Chosen, that series that many watch. So the prayer service at Constitution Hall will take place Friday morning before the march. At the conclusion of the march, we have the Silent No More campaign at the Supreme Court. This is a gathering right there on the sidewalk. The marchers will be going right by it, so I invite them to stop and listen to the testimonies of those who've had abortions. And they'll be not only revealing the damage abortion does, they'll be talking about how Jesus healed them and brought them to peace. Then we'll be in San Francisco the next day, and we'll do very similar events with a Planned Parenthood protest and a Silent No More gathering just before the big Walk for Life. So, Jenna, it's an exciting week. It's a moment for the pro-life movement to really manifest itself as the loving, prayerful, peaceful movement that it is, continuing to grow, always moving forward, and never deterred.
And I love it. And I love how, keeping it, the momentum advancing forward for life and for protections for life is, always constantly at the fore. And, it may seem to some like, this is a fight that we didn't really anticipate because, actually having Roe versus Wade overturned was such a monumental victory that, for my entire lifetime, that was the goal. And, now the fight is at the state level. Where do we sit kind of in that posture? I mean, maybe kind of just a quick update on the states that you're focusing on to either put in more protections, even stronger protections for life, or, fighting some bad legislation as well.
Yes. Well, we have a divided picture. Some states have become more pro-abortion. And as we've discussed many times, these constitutional amendments were put in over the last few years, allowing unlimited abortion. Other states have increased the protections for the unborn, over a dozen of them from the moment of conception, and others, like Florida, we moved all the way to protection starting at about 6 weeks. So we're looking at continued progress in that way. Many states are introducing pro-life legislation, but we have a number of states who in 2026 will have these ballot measure fights, and Virginia is one of the most egregious. Their newly elected Democrat majority got going right away. It was their first item. Let's put unlimited abortion into the Constitution. So we'll be fighting in Virginia. We're looking at other states too, including Idaho, that may have one of these destructive amendments. So we'll be keeping the audience posted on that. But there's also some interesting federal legislation too, because when Roe was reversed, it didn't take away responsibility from our federal lawmakers to protect the unborn. So there's a bill, for example, about pregnant students and the rights that they have to be given proper information on campus about alternatives to abortion and to be free from coercion in that regard. So we're getting behind a lot of those pro-life bills that are being introduced in the U.S. Congress. And, of course, looking at the funding issue, of course, which is always a big battle. We don't want our taxpayer dollars used for abortion. And funding battles will continue this year, as has already been in the news.
Amazing. And, how can people who are listening, I know this is such an issue that is close to the hearts of so many who regularly listen here and are part of our AFA family. Life is the most sacred of all rights, because without it, obviously, we can't exercise any of our other rights. And in 2026, with all of the other news going on and all of that, if this is the one issue that people really want to focus on, how would you encourage them to get involved? Because sometimes that seems a little overwhelming. It's like, okay, we obviously can pray, and we do as Christians, but actually taking the step to be engaged at a policy level can seem a little bit daunting. How do you encourage people to get involved?
Well, I encourage them to connect with a pro-life group that can alert them when, for example, a call should be made to their representative in Congress. We've got an effort like that. It's at stopabortionnow.org, where people will get a little alert and say, hey, there's a piece of legislation. Just give a quick call. We even give them the wording, suggested wording to use, so they don't have to be an expert on that, on that bill or on the issue. They just have to have the willingness to communicate with, the lawmakers who, after all, work for them and not the other way around. So getting involved in that way, staying connected with pro-life groups that have broadcasts and publications, again, which we have so much of that ourselves, as you know, staying involved in the political fight. We have the midterms, and, a person dedicated to protecting the unborn is going to, pay attention to the pro-life credentials of candidates and mobilize voters to elect the right people in the midterms. We have a C4 group called ProLifeVote.com. And, these are some of the ways. And finally, many of our listeners, of course, are very active in their churches. And across the body of Christ, we have resources for churches at prolife.church. And I'd invite people who want to be involved in the pro-life movement, take resources to your pastors, suggest ideas for what the church can do to proclaim that beautiful pro-life message to the congregation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is, I think, in the face of what's going on in Minneapolis, this is a reminder to pastors that the response should be to get even more engaged in policy issues and especially electing the right candidates that will actually stand firmly, not just speaking, and not just in talk, but in action. I mean, there have been so many, unfortunately, even Republicans, Frank, that, have gone to Washington or in state level positions that are kind of all talk on pro-life, but no action when it really matters. And I think that can be frustrating as well. And we need to vet candidates really thoroughly, look at their record, and, have they actually done what they have said they're going to do, or do the campaign promises kind of end, day one when they take office?
Well, to the point that you're making, I always say, don't ask a candidate, are you pro-life? And don't put much weight on it if they say they're pro-life. That's an adjective. Ask them instead of evaluatively, ask them descriptively, what will you do? What will you commit to do to advance the protection of the unborn? And that's got to be the focus. We get into all kinds of debates. Oh, is this person pro-life? Are they pro-life enough? Never mind about the adjectives. Let's focus on the concrete actions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So well said. Well, where can people follow you, get your great resources in just the last minute or so that we have?
Yes. Well, thank you, Jenna. Again, for the events of this week, please, everyone, go to prolifemarch.org and see what you can participate in or follow along with on social media. I'm at FR Frank Pavone, and you'll be getting live updates about this week's events. And then, of course, our main website is prolifecentral.org. Pro-Life Central, you'll see all the different branches of our ministry. And thanks, Jen. It's going to be an exciting week for this movement.
Yeah, thank you so much. Keep us updated, and Godspeed. Our prayers are with you. We support you, and be safe everywhere that you travel. That's all the time that we have for this morning, and as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.